let's look at her poem, as I mentioned, Sita. Let's read it and we'll then come back to what themes are explored here and what the analysis of the poem. Sita, three happy children in a darkened room. What do they gaze on with wide open eyes? A dense, dense forest where no sunbeam pries, and in its center a cleared spot. There bloom gigantic flowers on creepers that embrace tall trees. There, in a quiet, lucid lake, the white swans glide. There, whirring from the brake, the peacock springs. There, herds of wild deer race. There, patches gleam with yellow waving grain. There, blue smoke from strange altars rises light. There dwells in peace the poet anchorite. But who is this fair lady? Not in vain she weeps, for lo, at every tear she sheds, tears from three pairs of young eyes fall amain, and bowed in sorrow are the three young heads. It is an old, old story, and the lay which has evoked sad Sita from the past is by a mother sung till hushed at last and melts the picture from sight away. Yet shall they dream of it until the day when shall those children by their mother's side gather, ah me, as erst at eventide. You can see a pretty interesting way that she has spoken about Sita. She is talking about Sita not directly, but in terms of the story she is hearing from her mother. Three children, most probably Toru, Aru, Abju. Abju was their brother. They are in a darkened room. So we are told about a place when their mother probably has told them stories of Sita, and the poem is a remembrance of that story. It's a classic, in that sense, a romantic trope, right? Remembering the past and the past through the stories that are told to you, right? So, three happy children in a darkened room. What do they gaze on with wide open eyes? So, we are also given a sense of the oral tradition in India, and you will see that she wants to repeat the same thing, that like, okay, it's an old story which has evoked Sita from the past, that the power of the story is such, and we have so many folk tales where the power of the story is such that people have actually been so moved, and the fourth wall is broken, that like they can enter the story themselves. Like I think 300 Ramayanas by A.K. Ramanujan tells us of similarly of a story where the moved by the retelling of the Ramayana, the husband actually goes on to search for Sita's ring and actually comes back because they are so moved, so intrigued by the entire story. So you break the fourth wall down, the story itself becomes part of the story itself, the storytelling becomes part of the story. But here what happens is that you hear that this is also a kind of a nod towards Indian oral tradition where mothers tell stories, grandmothers tell stories to their children, and that's what we are told, reminded towards the end. It is an old story. The lay which has evoked sad Sita from the past is by a mother sung, and they still dream of it till day. So the narrator, the poet narrator, is thinking from the present day about stories of Sita that they used to hear and how evocative those stories used to be. And then there is a pathos in the voice in that sense. When shall those children by their mother's side gather? When will that time come again? The mother, and probably we are talking about sense of loss, the past not being there, the present not having the past with them. All those themes slowly start emerging, right? The storytelling tradition, people gathered around where there is a principle where you can have a real life transaction, and she probably is contrasting that to the written form itself, where there is a lot of distance between the teller and the hearer. The story gets transacted over a longer distance, both spatially as well as temporally, right? So let's go back to the poem again. So we have the theme of oral tradition, we have the theme of storytelling in India, and we are told hints are there about the past, a sense of nostalgia, and we also are looking at the theme of memory itself, that like she is thinking of her own time as a child. A dense, dense forest where no sunbeam pries, and in its center a cleared spot, and after that there becomes a refrain. You will see there being used. All of this is what we call in poetic terms is a refrain, that it's repeatedly used. Dense forest where no sunbeam pries leads to, reiterates and reminds us of the darkened room in which the children are also listening to the story, right? There bloom gigantic flowers on creepers that embrace tall trees. There in a quiet lucid lake the white swans glide. There whirring from the brake the peacock springs. There herds of wild deer race. There patches of gleam with yellow waving grain. There blue smoke from the strange altars rises light. There dwells in peace the poet anchorite. But who's this fair lady? Not in vain she weeps. For lo, every tear she sheds, tears from three pairs of young eyes fall. I mean, first let's look at this part at least. We're talking about the description of the forest in which Sita is there. We are told about the time after Sita is brought from Lanka, and Rama, because of based on rumors, has given her up, and she's living in the forest amidst rishis and sages. So thereby we see that the glamorous and the glorious forest, that it has gigantic flowers, it has wild white swans, it has peacocks, it has wild deers, it has gleams of yellow. There's a fantastic picture that is drawn by Toru Dutt, and you can see the power of her words, the precise language in which she makes this kind of a dialectic play, that the darkened dense forest, inside that forest there is a light, there is a patch of light, and this is filled with life. There is a lot of life, there is a lot of activity. You can see that like it's filled with beauty. Again, so we have a portion here. After this there is a break, and we see life filled with vitality, the richness of the forest, and light that is there. So if first one was dark, then there is light here, and then we come to who is this fair lady, and she is weeping, and there is almost a desertion of life that is there. So, you can see the poem moving in very through these contrasts. There is darkness, there is light, then there is vitality that we had talked about, then suddenly we are talking about desertion of life. Someone is crying and not in vain, and we are told again Sita's life, the story invoking tears from three pairs of young eyes. And bowed in sorrow are three young heads. So, if we have life and frivolity and happiness in these lines where wild deers and everyone is running around, here we have sadness. Life comes with life that is bringing out tears from these young guys, and then which are bowed in sorrow. And then we are also told here very importantly, and how through these themes or through these dialectics, the maturity of her poetry comes in is by a mother sung till hushed at last and melts the picture from their sight away. So, someone comes and hushes this story of Sita's sadness. And if we are going by the hint, if we are talking about this story where Sita was wronged by a man, we kind of think probably this hushing also refers to probably a man hushing her mother, probably the father hushing her mother, and melts the picture from their sight. So, the story is interrupted. The story is not given its due, but it's such a powerful evocative story that the children remember it very well. So, we confront pretty interesting themes from this poem. We have oral tradition, we have storytelling, we have talked about the past, the nostalgia, the memory, and then within that the gender equations. That like Rama, who interrupted and disrupted and caused grief and pain to Sita, likewise another hushing and disruption happens while telling her tale also, and this is again occasioned by, if we go by the hints of the poem, by another masculine figure. And she thinks about when yet shall they dream of it until the day. And once the story is disrupted, these children go back, they are put to sleep, that they have to sleep, they can't hear the story. They dream of until the day when shall those children by their mother's side gather. And again they gather. When these children have been put to sleep, they think about Sita's plight, Sita's sorrow, and then they are thinking also about the day when they will again get an opportunity, when the masculine presence will not disrupt, or they will again get to gather around their mother. So, we are also told about the masculine and the feminine. We are told about these spaces. So, the feminine space is the space of storytelling, dreaming, and the masculine is the space of disruption. As you can see, she's in these lines itself, if it's not just a reminder of nostalgia, that like, oh, this is what life was, and then we as children we used to hear poems about stories about Sita. She is able to incorporate within that indigenous tale her memories of the childhood, and also a critique of society itself. It shows the sophisticated nature of her own poetry itself. And if you go on to look at her most famous, most anthologized work, Our Casaurina Tree. It carries on certain those certain tropes forward, and mostly tropes of memory, loss, and nostalgia. A much bigger poem, lengthier poem than the earlier one. Let's read stanza by stanza. Our Casaurina Tree, like a huge python winding round and round, the rugged trunk indented deep with scars, up to its very summit near the stars, as creeper climbs in whose embrace is bound, no other tree could live. But gallantly the giant wears the scarf, and flowers are hung in crimson clusters all the boughs among, whereon all day are gathered bird and bee, and oft at night the garden overflows with one sweet song that seems to have no close, sung darkling from our tree while men repose. So you can again see descriptions of nature, very again following the romantic tradition. You can see why Derosio is important in fashioning of the idiom in that sense. You can see the confidence with which she talks about the tree itself, like a huge python, the winding round and round, the up the rugged trunk indented with scars, a creeper climbs in whose embrace is bound, no other tree could live. But gallantly the giant wears the scarf, that like the creeper is around the Casaurina tree, but the giant, it's called the giant, the Casaurina tree, wears the scarf, and flowers are hung in crimson clusters all the boughs among. Very romantic description, a Wordsworthian description of nature in its all glory, whereon all day are gathered bird and bee, and oft at nights the garden overflows. And you have a sense of overflowing, very Keatsian imagery if you think about Night Ode to a Nightingale and others, where we are talking about the profusion of flowers, life again being celebrated, natural glory being celebrated. When first my casement is wide open thrown at dawn, my eyes delighted on it rest. Sometimes, most in winter, on its crest, a grey baboon sits statue-like alone, watching the sunrise, while on lower boughs his puny offsprings leap about and play. That on the tree trunk, and she's talking about the cycle of life. We have already talked about while men repose in the last line itself, that when men sleep, the darkling sings from our tree, and there's a cycle of life that we are talking about, the passing of time. There is the cycle of life that is there, and you have passing of time, and then she again opens up with that idea that at dawn, if we are talking about songs when men repose, then we are talking about dawn here. My eyes delight on its rest when a baboon sits to watch the sunrise. So we are looking at the morning itself. A baboon looks at the sunrise, and we are talking about its child on the baby monkey leaping around in the tree itself. And far near co-killers hail the day, and you have a mention of something Indian here. And to the pastures wind our sleepy cows, and in the shadows on the broad tank cast by that hoar tree so beautiful and vast, the water lilies spring like snow enmashed. You can see both of them together, the water lilies and the snow. So we are talking about a Indian as well as a Western reality being juxtaposed here. Again, talking about the glory of nature. And then it brings the I into the play. The third stanza moves a bit differently, and now we are introduced to the speaker, but not because of its magnificence. Dear is Casaurina to my soul, beneath it we have played. Though years may roll, O sweet companions, loved with love intense, for your sake shall the tree be ever dear, blent with your image. It shall arise in memory till the hot tears blind my eyes. What is that dirge like murmur that I hear, like the sea breaking on a shingle beach? It is the tree's lament, an airy speech that happily happily to the unknown land may reach. That why is the tree dear to me? Not because it's like a giant tree. Yes, it is a giant tree. We are told that it's a giant tree. It wears a scarf, right? And we are reminded that, like, not because of its grandeur is it known to me. It's more because of my personal memory and my deep attachment to it. And therefore I am much more related and rooted with it, that it's my sweet companion, loved with love intense. And therefore, because I am not only remembering the tree, because under which I have played with other people, so she remembers for their sakes, for your sakes, the tree will be ever dear, because the tree also is almost like another companion, like other companions who have played under the tree also becomes dear. Blent with your images, it shall arise in memory. So the tree is not separate from the images of all her dear companions with whom she had played, with whom she had shared an earlier life. The tree becomes part of those memories. It shall arise in memory till the hot tears blind my eyes. And you can hear a dirge like murmur that I hear. So she's talking about the absence of those days, and that's why a dirge comes in. So there's a sense of lament that is there, that there is it's the tree's lament. The tree is still there, but we are not there. The tree, that's why, laments that where are my companions? Where are my friends who used to play with me? And probably the poet tries to say that the tree has also identified with us. That's why there is a lament from the tree. So we can see again personification and various ways that the romantic poets used to use nature to talk about human emotions itself. And she goes on to describe, unknown yet well known to the eye of faith, I have heard that wail far, far away in distant lands by many a sheltered bay. So she's talking about her own life when she has gone away to European shores. She still can't forget that tree, and she says that she has heard the tree. She has heard many, many times in very distant lands of France or Italy beneath the moon, when earth lay tranced in a dreamless swoon. And every time the music rose, before mine inner vision rose a form sublime, thy form, O tree, as in my happy prime I saw thee in my own loved native clime. And you can see that, like, she's talking about, like, even if I'm abroad in like these places, France or Italy, beneath the moon, I have remembered you from my own loved native climate. A sense of nostalgia, obviously, thinking of home, where home is a very ecological metaphor in that sense, because the tree is what signifies home, and also a very diasporic imagination of a lost home, or a home remembered. And you can see, I would love to read this as my own loved native climate might be a reference to Derosio's rebuke against the climate of India, that like nothing grows here in that sense, literature does not grow. And she's talking about that native climate where the tree grew. And the tree metaphorically also leads to her poems growing, right? The poetry grows from here, and she's thinking about that tree that is growing in her own dreams, in her own memories that are there. Therefore, I fain would consecrate a lay unto thy honor, tree beloved of those who now in the blessed sleep, for I repose, dearer than life to me, alas, were they. Mayst thou be numbered when my days are done with deathless trees, like those in Borrowdale. It's a reference from Wordsworth, where Wordsworth talks about yew trees. The yew trees also symbolize the everlasting nature. That's why she talks about the deathless trees. That you stand there, even when my days are numbered. You you stay there. You stay there as my memory. You stay there as a reminder of me also. In that sense, that mayst thou be numbered when my days are done with the deathless trees, under whose awful branches lingered pale fear, trembling hope, death, skeleton, and time the shadow. And though weak the verse that would thy beauty fain, O fain rehearse, may the love defend thee from oblivion's curse. So, a kind of a prayer in that sense, that like, oh tree, please be there, reminds of again O. Henry's that famous story, The Last Leaf. The a kind of a natal relationship between the tree and human life, in this case the poet's life, where she remembers the tree and constructs a verse about it. The verse also standing in for the poet, standing in for the tree, and standing in for the deathlessness of the tree. The tree will not die because I have almost immortalized in the poem itself. What is important to also notice is the poetics of this poem, which is, as you can see, the strength of the verse, very precise language that she innovates in. And obviously, as we are talking about in terms of Derosio, there is a fashioning of a new idiom. And one can see that this new idiom is being carried forward in other poets itself in of India, and we'll talk about them in our next lectures.